A Gathering of Gargoyles by Meredith Ann Pierce. Chapter 16, Sfinx. Everything was very dark. Ariel saw nothing and could feel nothing. She hung suspended in a void, so weary she could hardly think. She longed to sleep. Ariel, awake. Flickers of darkness now, little flames of golden light. Waken, Ariel, said Maria. The maidens encircled her like light-bearers, like stars. They who had once been the wizard wraiths, the vampire's brides, they were all so beautiful now. We followed your thread, Eowyn told her. Am I in deep heaven? Ariel asked. She had no body any more, but she felt heavy still, weighty as dust. No, Maria answered. We are a long way from there. Deep heaven is full of light. But we can go there, another maiden said, if you will come. Ariel frowned, made to frown, for she found she had no face, no brows to move. She murmured, Come with you? Yes, the maidens answered, yes. Maria had not spoken. Ariel gazed at her. She felt so tired. I do not want to come. But you must, the others cried. You must. I have no kith, no one to hold. You have no kith, no one to hold you in the world. Roshka, muttered Ariel. Roshka is my kith. You do not know that. It is not certain. But Durna said, she protested. Durna was mad, said Eowyn. I promised Aaron, Ariel began. Do you love her more than me? The other maidens held out their hands. We love you, Ariel. Still, Maria did not speak. Ariel resisted the urge to go to them. Hadden, she whispered. The princes of Esterness and the lady have me, and the lady love me. But Irilath does not love you. Ariel twinged. She felt a sharp, bitter pain where her heart should have been, for she feared they spoke the truth, and she longed to turn away, shut her eyes, shut her ears to their words. But she had no body, no ears or eyes. She could not turn from the maidens or shut them out. No, Ariel whispered at last. She could fight them no more. He does not love me. She longed to give up the world then, to go with them, leave the sorrow of that pain and everything else behind. Almost, she told them yes, but stopped herself. Someone was speaking to her from a very great distance. The maidens started and glanced at one another. Do not listen, Eowyn said. It is nothing, another told her. Ariel felt her body beginning to return. The feel of her own substance was unbearably heavy. Smothering almost against her will, she began to struggle. Someone is calling me, she told the maidens. Not so. Come with us, quickly, Ariel. No, Maria broke in suddenly. Eowyn had drawn very near, touching Ariel's cheek. She had a cheek now and could feel the touch. Companion, I very much wish that you would come with us. Ariel gazed at her, remembering how she had loved her in childhood and wanted to go with her. But Maria moved between them now. Eowyn hesitated, but at last drew reluctantly away. Now is not the time, said Maria. But it has been promised to us, the maidens cried, that we might have our Ariel among us soon. Not yet, Maria answered them. Nor is this the way. The White Witch is yet in the world. Ariel may not join our company until that one has been destroyed. Let her join us now, Eowyn protested, and nothing more of the world will matter to her. But the light and the voices of the maidens were growing faint. Someone was speaking to her, shaking her. There was a humming in her ears, a bitter scent. She felt her body completely once again enfolding her, holding her to earth. She could not have followed the maidens now if she had wanted. Her flesh was numb, cold as cave water. Ariel, Ariel, the voice was saying, come back to me, come back. The dark was not utter darkness any more. The maidens had gone. The surface beneath her shivered slightly. Ariel heard digging, scratching, another voice. Stop, you will ruin that blade. Let it be ruined then, the first voice cried. We must get her free. I have a better means. Ariel heard a clinging, coupled with chinks, as of bright metal ringing on stone. Someone was pulling her, lifting her. The surface beneath her shuddered, its hold weakened. Then there was a sharp pain, and she moaned. There, she is still caught there. The ring of metal once again. She felt a chipping, then a hard, sharp crack, a bitter puff. The humming of the stone fizzled in a faint, cracking flash. Someone was lifting her away from it. Ariel, he said. Ariel! She remembered to breathe. Something brushed her lips, her eyes. She opened them, blinked in surprise. It was Irilaf bending over her. His one hand hovered above her cheek. His lips parted slightly, his eyes half wild. She lay upon the temple floor, no longer on the stone. The duro stood a few paces off, beside the stone. It crackled still, and then it ceased. Its hum fell silent. A very fine, Burnian blade lay in splinters on the floor. The little mage held in his hand the silver hammer she had brought from the undercaves of Purs. Irilaf saw her looking at him then. He snatched back his hand, leaning away from her with a start. Ariel shuddered with the cold. Her skin felt like the shadow of night. Save across her shoulders, the backs of her arms, everywhere that she had touched the stone was fire. She reached one hand toward Irilaf. She could hardly get her fingers to move or her lips to part. Did he kiss me? She thought to herself. She almost felt that she would die if he had not. But he flinched away from her. No, he whispered, staring at her, as though she frightened him suddenly. Ariel put one hand to her head. I felt something, she murmured. Some inward part of her protested his denial. He loves me, it must be so. Oh, let him love me, for I want it so. But a great feeling of hopelessness was overcoming her. Had she only imagined his touch? She felt fainting weak. Irilaf shuddered and pulled away from her. He rose with difficulty, as though leaving her were somehow hard, and turned away. Not I. It was not I. Ariel dragged herself upright and managed to sit. She felt too spent, too defeated for tears. Dark chips of glassy stone lay on the floor. The temple chamber was very dim, for Solstar was down. Talb had put away the silver pick. He knelt beside the fire pit now, throwing fuel upon the coals. Horrible sounds came from the gargoyles on the rocks below. Ariel was still shaking. Someone had wrapped her in pale gold cloth, yards and yards of it, very light and fine. It held no heat. The duro steeped tea over the coals and made her drink, for she was white with cold. The pain in her shoulders and along her back was fierce. The little mage tore something into strips and bandaged her arm, which, along its underside, looked badly scraped. He had no salve. All this time Irilaf stood off, the light of the fire pit making hollows in his eyes. The flames in the pit died down to coals. The little mage left them and went off in search of firewood. Irilaf had taken the bandolin from her pack. Knelt gazing at it, his fingers touched the strings, at first tentatively, and then with great beauty and skill. Ariel recognized the melody, the haunting, sweet notes, almost painful to her ears. That he could be capable of such beauty and yet still hold himself aloof. Surely she could never reach him. You play so well, Ariel murmured at last, much better than I. Why have I not heard you play before? Irilaf set down the bandolin. He did not look at her. In the witch's house, he said, I forgot such things. Only now, since I have been in Istrinus, have I begun remembering. He was silent a moment. Then he said, almost fiercely, This was my bandolin that my mother brought out of Avaric. She had no right to give it to you. Ariel looked down, surprised and somehow stung. She was wearing her wedding sari. She recognized it now. She lifted a little bit between her fingers and looked up again. Did you bring this with you out of Istrinus? She asked. Irilaf breathed deep, as though the air were going bad. When Haddon told me you had gone, he said, I set out in a boat to follow you. His words grew steadier now, not quite ragged. I was becalmed, I nearly starved. But Merlon, the lithe serpent of the sea of dust, found me. She said she had seen you safe ashore in Bern. Then Ariel remembered the great plumed head that had risen from the surf and gazed at her. Had it been no dream? She stared at Irilaf. Had he come following her? Was he here in Orm on her account? She shook her head. It had not occurred to her before. Her hand was shaking. She toyed with the pebble at the fire pit's edge. I got aid and burn from my cousin Saber, Irilaf continued. The whole country was alive with news of the green-eyed sorceress who had stolen a strange beast from the city of thieves and disappeared through the Demon's Pass. Saber, Ariel said, trying to recall where she had heard the name. It came to her slowly. Nat's words, in Talus Inn. The Bandit Queen. Irilaf glanced at her. She was my father's sister's child, or she is my father's sister's child, and rules a band of those who fled the plains. Some have been calling her the Queen of Avaric, thinking me dead. Again he was silent, looking away. I lost you in Zamble, he murmured. His mouth tightened, his scarred cheek twitched. Where have you been? I have been in Terrain 2 day-months searching for you. I was in Purs, said Ariel. Irilaf drew his breath. Why did you go away from Isternus? Did you not guess the witch would learn of it? She nodded. I knew. His fierceness puzzled her. How could knowing have mattered? The prince turned back to her. Why, then? Why did you go? I had you safe in my mother's house. Ariel sighed for sheer weariness. I had a task. Even that did not matter any more. The Sibyl was dead. Now she would never find out the lawns of Now she would never find the lawns of Westerness before the witch. The Lorelei had won. I came in search of winged steeds. She looked off, then laughed a little bitterly. I have found only gargoyles instead. She turned to him. You cannot defeat 6 dark angels alone. Irilaf was gazing at her now, as though he did not believe her, did not believe what she had just said, or did not believe she would dare such a task. Was she only a girl in his thinking still? And what did that matter now in any case? The world was lost. But he only said, 7 dark angels if the witch can steal another babe. A tiny hope flared in Ariel suddenly. She dared to breathe. What became of the lawns of the West, she asked him, the ones the Ikari overthrew? But hope sputtered and died as Irilaf shook his head. He spoke with difficulty. She knew how he loathed to recall anything of the witch. I do not know, he said distantly. When I had captured the lawn of Avaric, I was to bring him to her, but he eluded me, and the desert died. Again he shook himself. The lawns were to be brought to her, that's all I know. Ariel bowed her head. She was so weary. She ached. But she could not stop herself from asking, Why did you come? What do you care what should befall me? She spoke softly, barely above a whisper. You are my husband in nothing but name. You are neither my lover nor my friend. She was staring down, could not see his face. When at first he did not reply, she thought it was because he had not heard. But he spoke at last, the words measured. Before I came away from Isternus, I told Silva what you knew I must, that it was I who had been the dark angel in Avaric that you overthrew. Ariel looked up. He had turned his face away. To which she put her hand upon my cheek. He touched the scars, just there, and said she had already guessed. His voice grew dark. He gazed upward. Silva had known all along. Ariel watched him, finding herself strangely unsurprised. Of course she knew. How could she not? The lady was his own mother. How could she not? Did you think her a fool? And we'll pause there.